All right, we go straight to the first presentation for the day, which deals on cyber governance and security, lessons from across the globe. The wonderful man I'm going to bring on the podium now to deliver this great presentation goes by the name Abdul-Hakeem Ajijola. In global security resources, is ranked #1. Please, nobody else heard from him. IFSEC 2020 Global Cybersecurity Professionals, Influencers, and Thought Leaders list is he chaired the African Union Cybersecurity Expert Group, Addis Ababa. He chaired the Working Group on Cyber Incidents Management and Critical Information Protection of the GFCE, the hearing, and Commissioner Global Commission on the Stability of Cyberspace. And also, this is just amongst others, Abdul-Hakeem is the Chairman, Consultancy Support Services, CS2 Limited, a cybersecurity e-library and information communications technology policy consultancy firm here in Abuja, Nigeria. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Abdul-Hakeem Ajijola.
Okay, let's quickly dive in. I hope our colleagues from Bank of Industry are still around with us. Good. Let me try and address, if I can, if you permit me to respond to the elegant lady from BOI and the handsome gentleman she introduced me to. I would like to, in response to your intervention, basically put forward a proposal and a suggestion. I think it would be nice if Bank of Industry, Shizan, and people like myself sit together and basically develop a cybersecurity solutions industry for Nigeria. And I'll tell you why. There is an African cybersecurity solutions market, of which I think we would all agree Nigeria is probably one of the largest, if not the largest player. In 2020, that market was valued at $0.95 billion, as in B, billion dollars US. By 2023, next year, that market is estimated to hit anywhere between 3.6 and 4.5 billion dollars US. Just Africa, just solutions. I'm not talking about the problem. After all, when we have a headache, somebody makes Panadol and makes money from us. So we too should make money from this headache. ISC Square, and then William McCanty of Sirano in Kenya. He's into these kind of numbers. He projects that by, well, let me say the next 10, 15 years, the African cybersecurity solutions market will range anywhere from 15 to 30 billion dollars US. Now, the global market might be 280 billion by 2028. That's the difference. I'm talking about here. The second why that I would like BOI and CISHAN and members here to think about. ISC Squared carries out an annual survey of vacancies. As of last year, the vacancies topped 2.1 million globally. That means there are jobs for 2.1 million people that are not filled. Unfortunately, we have our youth dying crossing the desert. We have those same youth, if they make it, dying crossing the Mediterranean. And if they're that fortunate to even make it through those two tests, many of us, our youth, become underclass citizens in Europe and North America. So if we as a nation, as a society, in this kind of partnership, can build their capacity so that they are even flown to these places, business class, they become a respected diaspora. Yes, they will send home remittances. Today, I believe diaspora remittances bring more income than oil to this country. But more importantly than the remittances, some of them, when they come back with relationships and credibility. With due respect to many of us in this room, if you write to one of our partners from abroad, and they get this letter from a Nigerian, especially if you sign Prince at the end of the letter, it will probably not even go in the dustbin. It will first go in the shredder. But if you've worked with them for 5, 10 years as part of the diaspora, not only will they listen to your idea, they will also entertain the possibility of bringing investment. So these are some of the multiplier effects I see. And also we must understand that this cybersecurity market is going to be there whether we do anything or not. So we need to ask ourselves, Bank of Industry, I ask you, as the lawyers would say, I put it to you. Is this industry or are the cybersecurity solutions going to be a foreign exchange drain for this country? Or are they going to be a foreign exchange gain? My vision, and I hope the vision of many of you, will be that by 2028, let us have a cybersecurity solutions industry, not company, 1,000 companies if you like, each employing 20 youth. Imagine what that does to our economy. So I guess with that, I can skip the rest of my presentation and go home. But I hope the message is conveyed. Thank you very much. So when we talk of the cyber attacks, they are real. While I was talking, there was something in a company I sit on the board here in Abuja, we have our own honeynet, and these were just some of the stats coming from the honeynet. Bottom line is 40,000 attacks per minute, 200,000 attacks per hour, 54.5 million attacks per day. It happened. To pick up on, I think, what the DG of NIDA had actually also mentioned, we are no longer protecting computers. Computers are not important as far as I'm concerned. It's protecting you and I. It's protecting society. It's protecting Mama Lakara, Mala Meshai, Mama Okpa, because they are using these devices. They can receive credit, send credit, check their balances. They are the people we are trying to protect. And this is where we must move our mindset as we move forward. Now, the cyber threat space, I know many of those who have spoken already, basically, look at this. It's quite complex, it's quite varied. But there are a number of issues. Down at the bottom, I can use this. We have a new generation of threats, and they are geopolitical. Not just because Russia and Ukraine are fighting. That is spurring it, but it's been on for a while. We have also unregulated digital currencies. These are now cyber threats. We have a lot of non-state actors. In many cases, the state itself actually sponsors those actors. There have been quite a few exfiltrations of large amounts of data, massive amounts of data, but they've not yet, not some of them, not a single piece of that data that has been stolen has come on the market. So what are they doing with it? Maybe they are using it to get at somebody, to blackmail somebody. I don't know. But my point is there are many funny things going on. There are also people who are stealing encrypted data, data that they cannot access. I mean, why would you do such a funny thing? And ladies and gentlemen, it's quite simple. Quantum computing is around the corner. So they are stealing the data today while they can, in anticipation of the quantum computing that can break it in the near future. So even the bad actors are thinking ahead. And I won't dwell on this too much. I think more technical people here. So when we talk about governance, we have to be a bit cautious. The etymology of cyber, the word cyber itself, is from the Greek. It derives from the Greek word governance. So actually, I think inadvertently, the organizers asked me to talk about governance. But in the global context, you have some global organizations. For example, you have the UN, you have FIRST. The UN also works through many groups, but ITU is one of the major institutional mechanisms. You also have the OIC CERT, which I have the honor of being one of the founders. But the idea is that there are these discussions going on up there at the global level. Then at the regional level, you have the Asia-Pacific Computer Emergency Response Team. And again, governance is very wide. I just try to limit it to things like CERTs, and so that I would not be going all over the place. There is also the European, basically European CERT, for lack of a better description, is called ENISA. One of the key components of the new legislation that gives ENISA some teeth and power was derived from some work we did at the Global Commission for the Stability of Cyberspace, and that is the protection of the public core. Not public as in public sector, but as in the commons, the public commons. And those particular things are things like the DNS, the domain name system. So that even if you are fighting amongst yourselves as countries, don't go and impact the DNS that will take all of us, the whole world, down. In Africa, we have the Africa CERT, and I think some of your colleagues and partners are part of that. And specifically in West Africa, ECOWAS has a program called OKWASI. And I'm very happy to note that in terms of ECOWAS, compared to the other African sub-regional bodies, they are actually quite well ahead. Back to Africa, Africa has set up something called PRIDA. It's in my other notes, I forgot the name. But another mechanism they have established is something called the African Union Cybersecurity Expert Group. It's made up of 10 people, of which I happen to have the honor of being the chair. We also have organizations such as Oman CERT. Now, Oman CERT should be on the next level, which is the national CERT, which it is. But Oman CERT also hosts the Arab Regional Center of Excellence. This is an ITU-driven agenda. Originally, ITU started with something called Impact, but basically Impact didn't work. The model didn't work. It was based in Malaysia. So they came up with a new model for centers of excellence. Today, the Sub-Saharan Center of Excellence should be NCC in Nigeria. This is something that we've fiddled about with. I believe with this administration, the ball is being picked up. But the point is that other countries, Togo is a very good example, they want it, and for good reason. And then below the national level, in Nigeria, we have our ONSA CERT, has been mentioned, the National Cybersecurity Center in the UK, JP CERT, Cybersecurity Malaysia. But coming down to specialized CERTs, in Nigeria, for example, not quite our indirect hosts here, the Central Bank of Nigeria, they have a fusion center which is focused on banking, insurance, the finance sector. Interestingly, the beginning of CERT was not government. In fact, the term CERT is copyrighted by Carnegie Mellon University. So the first CERT in the world actually was an academic CERT. And that is part of what I hope to do today, just to encourage you to think beyond where we normally put ourselves or look at things. So this is a study, 53, I don't expect you to read it, that's not the point. But Cybersecurity Malaysia in 2020 actually did a study of, because this was something I was curious about, who do CERTs answer to? Remember, the context for this for me was that at the time we were developing the Nigerian Cybersecurity Policy and Strategy, the refresh. So, as the chair of that committee, I wanted to know on average who do CERTs report to around the world, because that gives you the model. And this, for example, is just a blow-up of that. And this is what Cybersecurity Malaysia came up with. And I'll just go through some summaries so you can see the different models, the different reporting lines. You have the case of Brunei. Now, no doubt, Brunei, as many of you will know, is a very rich country financially. But they have challenges with their personnel, their population. So actually, they outsourced it. So it's private sector driven. I'm very happy the gentleman from, is it Akonis? Is that the correct pronunciation? ASECO, my apologies, ASECO, gave the example of TogoCert, which is public-private driven. Not everything has to be government, as the local man would say. Government doesn't have to do everything. Government can and should be at the back end, not necessarily at the front end. We can also see the case of Oman, where not only do they have their national cert, but they co-locate or co-house, co-manage the regional cert or center, the Arab Regional Center of Excellence. So again, these are the different models we see. When we look at, for example, UAE, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, their cert basically has a dual answering role, a partnership between the equivalent of NCC and the equivalent of ONSA, or the intelligence community. Australia, boom, is just in the Ministry of Defense. That's it. There's actually a second one, which is private sector. It's also a national cert. So Australia, too, has a slightly different model. When we look at India, India is a bit more of a hodgepodge. Ministry of Interior. This is interesting. Interior. You have to remember that in many countries, actually, interior is basically like a military. It is intelligence driven. That is where the national, like your DSS is housed. But also, part of the partnership is their equivalent of Federal Ministry of Communications and Digital Economy. In Japan, like I think Saudi Arabia, it is housed within the equivalent of ONSA. Now, Saudi Arabia is a very interesting case for me. When we started the OIC cert, they were one of our members. And the cert actually was housed and reported to the Ministry of Interior. This was the governance mechanism. But subsequently, in fact, there was a time they just went dark for a couple of years. What happened? Nothing. Then when they now resurfaced, they were now under the intelligence community. So again, these are other models. Estonia is a very interesting case for many reasons. Back in 2007, Estonia experienced a series of devastating cyber attacks, very specifically DDoS attacks. And let me just relate the story to you. What happened was that there was a statue. Okay, Estonia used to be under the Soviet Union. When the Soviet Union collapsed, Russia was created, Estonia, Lithuania, and some of these other Baltic countries. So Estonia does have Russian speakers, but there was this particular statue in town of a man on a horse, and it was a Russian general. So the Estonian government decided, we are going to move, not destroy it, we are going to move the statue to a park, where if you want to see it, you go to the park and you can, as they say, waka about. The Russians were very upset. Now, the allegation, as they say, attribution in cyberspace can be a bit tough. There are 3 types of attribution. Let me branch. You have technical, which is relatively easy. Yes, now you do them. But there's legal. Do you have enough evidence to take me to court? But the most difficult of all is political. Because if my government is taking loan from China, I can't go and accuse them of something. It's life, realpolitik. So anyway, Estonia experienced this severe denial of service attacks. What is a denial of service attack? I think most of us in this room today came through the door at the top. As you come through the door, that's the service. It's opening the way. You can imagine if somebody in this room shouts fire or bomb and we all want to get out at the same time. The door cannot take all of us. So some of us that cannot get out we'll be denied service. Maybe the bomb or the fire might catch us. So anyway, that's denial of service. Back to Estonia. So, for a 3-week period, Estonia could not get any digital service. Just imagine you in Nigeria. If you go after our digital services and you cannot transfer money from your account, you cannot receive money to your account, you can't do anything with your bank for an hour, for 2 hours, for a day, for 2 weeks. I think kata don't shall be that. And interestingly, again, another diversion, forgive me, organizers. You've all heard of the Arab Spring. When the Arab Spring happened, we had some younger people like you, activists, which is good. And they constituted themselves into hacktivists. And they purposefully infected their systems with botnet software. That's another story. But basically, botnets are what helps you to do the denial of service. So, all of a sudden, they started attacking some Tunisian, this was in Tunisia, where it started, infrastructure. The first infrastructure was the bank, very specifically the clearinghouse. So again, if your bank clearinghouse, CBN or NIBSS goes down, your money no go move. It's there. The second thing they attacked was the top-level domain. So if you have a .mil, .ng, .com, .ng, .gov, you know, go see the website, you will not be able to send or receive an email. But anyway, back to the governance issues. Again, in the case of France, it is very much with the intelligence community. And in the case of Spain, as you can see, it's mostly the presidency is there, but it's much more a Ministry of Defense matter. So when we look at the graph, basically, from what, sorry, it's a bit dark, forgive me. Of the 51 countries that we looked at with cybersecurity Malaysia, about 28% actually their certs report to the equivalent of Ministry of Communication. About 13 or so report to the intelligence community. And again, an equivalent number report directly to the presidency. So, but I just want to point out the issue of the Ministry of Interior. Because again, when I first mentioned this, a lot of people say, Ministry of Interior, okay, how? Well, like I said, different strokes for different folks. But look at some of the big guys. China, Russia, the US, their certs report to Interior. Homeland Security is equivalent of Ministry of Interior. You may say it's different, it's America. I agree. I'm just pointing it out. Say, na so it be. So it's just food for thought. But in terms of our governance, this is actually what should guide us. This should be, in my opinion, the core roadmap. What is the framework we need to look at in this country? So we look at least, and this is from an ITU study by Professor Tai Debag of Morocco. He chaired the group. They came up with about 5 domains and 34 processes. So domain 1 was about the strategy and the policies. 2 was implementation and organization, and I'm going to come to that in a moment. 3 was about awareness and communication. I think it's been mentioned here today already. If your people are not aware, it no go happen. 4 is compliance and coordination, not just local coordination, but international. And 5 is monitoring and evaluation. So the key takeaway for us is that really each country, has its own slightly different way of doing it. We are not saying Nigeria must, but these are the governance options that we need to look at and consider as a country as we move forward. The politics, can we afford it? Affordability. When you say affordability, not just financial, do you actually have the human resources? And so this brings me to a study, and I know Professor Allen is going to talk later, but Professor Nathaniel Allen and I, he's at the National Defense College in Washington, D.C., we did our own study and we wrote a paper. And let me focus on the one that matters, Nigeria. As Nigeria, we did our own policy and strategy. I cannot run away from it. We got 4 out of 5. 80%. Please give us a round of applause. I'm sure for the Nigerians that all of you did WAEC. If you went home from WAEC with 80%, what will your parents say? Huh? They'll say, well done. They might even buy you a gift to take you for dinner. You are sure? But what if the 20% are English and math, where you no get? That is our problem. The way we went about multi-stakeholder, talking to people, the NSA, they did the right thing, they got the right things in place. Like I said, I claim it. I was part of it. One of the things that came forth from this process was that we need an agency or a commission, a full agency. No in between. But it became clear as we were working that the government, the administration, did not have the appetite for an agency. Specifically, financial appetite. Why? Look, we are telling government on one hand, you have too many parastatals. You have 650 or 645 or 648 or something. You need to cut them. Meanwhile, somebody now is telling you need to start another one. Get as it be. But again, let us look at an example. When we talk about drugs, I'm sure most of us know about drugs. When we talk of illegal drugs, we have a specialized agency. What's it called? NDLEA. Thank you. But when it comes to legal drugs, what's it called? NAFDAC. So just for drugs, we have 2 specialized agencies. Can you imagine? Do we not think that cybersecurity is sufficiently specialized and important to have an agency of its own? I'm biased. I think yes. So, as a compromise, what we did was that we took the NSA's perspective and we said, let's set up a center. Unfortunately, or fortunately, let me start with, the president launched the document on the 23rd of February, 2021. As I stand before you today, that center still does not exist. It may exist in a month, but it means a whole, almost year and a half has passed. The institutional governance mechanism to drive that policy is still not in place. Now, before some of you stand up and say, but you know Nigeria now, we are good at producing policy documents, but we can't, this implementation now, wahala. Now. No, it means the policy document is not good because you need to factor it. And yes, we did factor it. So what did we do? We said that each regulator should drive the implementation. That is why today you will see CBN has its fusion center, so the policy is being done at that level. Remember, those people who are the regulators, they already have the legal authority, they already have the ecosystem. You know, if you are a bank and you don't do waiting CBN talk, they go, look your license, stroke and small. So too with NCC. If you don't do what NCC says, telecoms, then go just start to touch your license. You say, make I do am. NIDA for the public service has. ONSA is there. DSA out in Dubai is for the military. So the policy actually, to be fair, is being implemented, but that central coordination mechanism is still missing. So why I'm giving you some of these stories, because God willing, some of you tomorrow will be developing these strategies and policies. And I want you to understand that we have our failings as a society, as a nation, and it is important that your policy document structures those failings so that the policy, even if it is only 80%, will continue. Because Mama Alakara needs it. Look, how many of us have sat down and given our handset or our tablet to a child, maybe our own or nephew or somebody in our compound, 8 years to 15 years? Okay, you want to come present? Thank you. Then you go stand outside, no Allah. So, if you give them those tablets or whatever, what do? They do magic. So who is teaching them how to be safe? This is the issue. They are the people coming up. So what is the structure we have here? Good. At the center, you have the president, supported by the National Security Advisor. The National Security Advisor has a Cybercrime Advisory Council. The thing in yellow is actually that agency. In this case, the compromise of the center. At least, make we get that one going. Although, I will be honest with you, at this stage, I think we should scrap the idea of the center and just bite the bullet and go for a full agency. There's no need. Because the interim period would have been from when the policy was launched to now to prepare. So if we're going to do it, let's just, if it's so difficult to do the small one, maybe we just struggle to do the big one time. And then, of course, NG CERT, the forensics lab that the general spoke about. So you have all these other sectors in terms of the national security, the defense. The army has its own initiative. In fact, the army is going a step further. Not only do they have their command, they actually have a school dedicated to this. CBN I've mentioned, NCC, so on and so forth. So again, this is what that architecture, that generally would look like. I know you are coming to tell me to. No, Allah. I will soon go. Give me a minute. Okay. So, this is my own suggestion of how the agency or the center should look. I'm not saying governments must do it. As Obasanjo used to tell us, your own is to advise, it doesn't have to take it. So my own, I'm just advising. So this is just some suggestions and ideas. But it is crucial that we have some kind of, in anything we are doing, any policy we are making, there must be an education or academic component. Because if you do not create the pipeline for human resources, you cannot succeed. One of the reasons in cyber that you see many ogas, they prefer to employ women than men. Because invariably, by the time the man has done 6 months, you come and say, Oga, I don't get a Canadian visa, I dey go with that. But let us not leave out our military. This again, now suggestion, I don't say make you take them. You have your national mission forces that generally would look out for your critical infrastructure. Arguably today, national civil defense takes care of critical national assets. Assets infrastructure in our English, Turenchi. But the point is that you should have a group that focuses on that. Then, at the other end you need people who will protect the military establishment, the national security establishment, different from the society. This is his focus. So those are the guys in blue over there, the cyber protection forces. And yes, you don't talk about them much, but you might need the guys in the center from time to time to actually go after and disrupt the bad actors. So, let me conclude. Thank you, sir. Nobody else is going to help us except ourselves. Our friends from abroad can support us. They can encourage us. They can even give us some startup. But at the end of the day, now go do them. Now me and you go do them. You cannot run to Washington for solution. You cannot run to Tel Aviv for solution. You cannot run to Kuala Lumpur or Singapore for solution. We must, and this comes back to where I started, we must develop our own. We must build our proficiencies. Not just proficiency in terms of the technical, but how to navigate through this cyber world and relationships between countries and nations, different kinds of technology, making sure that, do you know that 70% of the data networks in Africa come from one place, China. So if China says then go off them, now what for you? Do you know that 50% of the handsets we use in Africa come from one place, China? On the other hand, Facebook is from where? No, Facebook is not from China. Instagram. Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp is from where? So you see, single point of failure. If Trump stand up, say, no, like your face, he will tell, anyway, that's a story for another day. Please, again, I'm looking at you guys as those people who are going to be the policymakers, who are going to drive this agenda. And I beseech you, I plead with you, I ask you, when you are developing these programs, including Bank of Industry, please factor the underserved, the unserved, and the unborn, because they have to live with the decisions and the precedents that we set today. They are not at the table, they are not there. So we must factor them. So I think on that note, as they say in my village, wo yayi, magi obo, as they say in my wife's village.